The December 3rd, 2014 meeting of the school committee will come to order. As is our tradition, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag and our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a couple of additions to the agenda. Under number 5, Chairman's Report, I've added item C, which will be the Transportation and Traffic Safety Subcommittee update. And under Executive Session, item 11, I've added item B, which will be Collective Bargaining Strategy for MEA and AFSCME. And Member Bagley-Jones has informed us she has to leave by 9. So in order to ensure that we have her input on all of the important items on the agenda, we're going to take the Finance Subcommittee report first, right after Citizens Speak, and Chairman's report second, and then we'll move to Superintendent's report, Facilities Subcommittee report. Maura, do we have anyone for Citizens Speak? No one for Citizens Speak. Ms. Kelly, Chair of the Finance Subcommittee.
That was quick. The first item is the approval of vendor warrants. So it asked Assistant Superintendent Pavlicek to update us with the latest warrant or warrants.
I have 3 items actually for your approval and signature tonight. The first is our vendor warrant number 23. It's dated December 4th. It's in the amount of $893,038.15.
So I would move approval of warrant number 23.
Second.
On the motion, it's been moved by Ms. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Bagley-Jones. All in favor?
May I just ask, has there been any members to review at this point?
Yes, there have been 2 signatures so far on it.
2 signatures?
2 more this evening.
Okay.
On the motion? On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Abstain? 501, with Ms. Kelly abstaining.
The second item I have for you this evening is also going to require approval and signatures. It's a transfer of money from our account, from the full-day kindergarten account to the town's group insurance account. When we added full-day kindergarten several years ago, we picked up the cost of the insurance for the additional staffing as part of our contribution, so that there would be no net increase in insurance to the town. So I have a memo here to the town accountant. Per our agreement regarding the funding of health insurance for full-day kindergarten, the school committee authorizes the transfer of $60,556.80 to the group health insurance account. And so I would ask for your vote on that.
Do I have a motion?
So motion.
Moved by Ms. Bagley-Jones,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Kelly. Discussion?
Question. How many people does that cover?
When we set up full-day kindergarten, we identified a number of additional staff and picked up their insurance costs. Some of the additional staff take insurance, some of them don't. It currently represents about 8 people, but only 5 of them are actually taking health insurance.
Thank you.
Mr. Zulus?
Going to ask, and is that a budgeted item? Is that in the budget?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's part of our full-day kindergarten budget.
Okay, and it's something that's been budgeted and paid in prior years as well?
We pay it every year. In prior years, until last year, it was actually an item in the vendor warrant. Last year, we moved it to this sort of separate item as an approved memo, because when it's in the vendor warrant, what happens is the town ends up writing a check to the town, printing out a check, and then depositing it right back in the same account that they took it out of, which seemed a little redundant.
Okay.
So we've gone this route for interfund transfers. So this is the second year we've done it as an interfund transfer, but it's, we've done this since the inception of full-day kindergarten.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
How does the total compare to last year?
It's within $1,000. It's essentially the same. It was about $60,000 last year. It's about $60,000 this year.
Superintendent? Go on.
To Ms. Kelly's point, I was just going to briefly tell the story that when we decided to implement full-day kindergarten, between the kindergarten grant and tuition, the commitment, Ms. Kelly, am I right, from the school committee and the charge was that it would not cost the taxpayer, and we would pay for the full-day kindergarten through the grant again and through the tuitions. And part of that, the viewing audience might say they asked the question about the insurance, so it was the additional staff. So if we didn't have those 8 teachers, we would be back to the half-day program, and we examine that every single year. But the commitment was that full-day kindergarten would be paid for, again, for the third time, through the grant and tuitions. So the town should not own wasn't that right, Mrs. Kelly? Would not own the additional health insurance for the increase in teachers.
Correct.
On the motion, all in favor? It's unanimous.
And the third item is another interfund transfer. This concerns our agreement with the police department for the second school resource officer. And it's to authorize a transfer of $60,000 to the police department pursuant to our MOA with them to fund the second school resource officer position.
Do I have a motion? Second?
I'll second it. Oh, no, I didn't think they did, sorry.
Lori did.
Oh, okay.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So could we get some clarification around that? That's confusing to me, because I thought that, I'm just confused about that, sorry.
Our memorandum of understanding with the police department, when we added a second school resource officer last year, was that we would pay the salary of that individual. And we set out a schedule, and it was basically an amount for this year of $60,000 was flat, not to exceed that amount. And so I've received a request from Town Hall to pay that amount for his salary. It needs to be transferred to the police department so that they, in fact, can pay him. The question, it's an interfund transfer to their salary. It basically is budgeted in our budget, and it needs to be moved to their budget.
I guess I'm just confused as to why we're paying it now when we've had that position for a long time.
We paid $30,000 last spring for the half of year that we had the person last year, and this is the fiscal 15 commitment.
So is that on a time payment that we pay $60,000 at a time, or?
It's a one-time payment for the year.
And question? And this is for the one at Pierce? No. We just have one now?
We have two, but one is on maternity leave at the moment.
Right.
But they're not assigned to Pearson High School
Oh,
per
I
se.
thought they were.
They move around.
Okay. But the first one we have, does that come from the police's budget or ours?
The police
That's what I
pays
thought.
for the first one.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question, sorry.
Yeah.
So going forward, is there a payment schedule that's established for?
There's an annual amount set out in the MOA, described in terms of the officer's salary and so forth. It's just in the first couple of years, it was a flat amount, $30,000 for the half year last year and $60,000 for this year.
Okay. And this is when it was due?
Sorry?
This is when it was due?
The MOA didn't say when it was due.
Okay.
It just said we will pay it.
Thank you.
On the motion, all in favor? It's unanimous.
May I just make a follow-up comment about that, Mr. Walker? I think that it might be something that the Finance Subcommittee could take under consideration about when that gets paid, or if the MOA doesn't have a timeline in it, should it have a timeline in it, or is it just
Sure.
when it's asked for, or just to get some clarity around that?
We'll
Thank
take a
you.
look at that, yep.
Oh, sorry. The next item is the advancement budget. So I'd ask, I think we have a brief, fairly brief presentation. Just to remind everyone, sort of the discussion we had, the introductory discussion we had at the last meeting. And just to, what we're hoping to at the end of this is have discussion and then take a vote on the advancement budget.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. So with Dr. Pavlicek setting up the presentation, for those who might not have watched the last school committee meeting, to put this in a very, as Mrs. Kelly said, brief context, for the last 2 years, the school committee, with the guidance of the Finance Subcommittee, charged the school district to analyze our student data and to identify what we need to move the school district ahead based on our student data. So as I said at the last meeting in this very room, we meet with the principals and our Unit B coordinators and curriculum leaders, and they brainstorm together. We report back every Tuesday morning to Finance Subcommittee, and collaboratively with the Finance Subcommittee, we develop this advancement budget. Again, based on student data, what are the needs of the district to move student achievement and move the district forward. So we did a larger presentation at the last meeting. That presentation is online. The Finance Subcommittee asked us just for a brief summary. So we begin with always our vision in the Milton Public Schools is to build and strengthen a dynamic community that challenges all students to thrive and achieve. And in order to create this educational system that supports this vision for all students and advances the Milton Public Schools, the following advancement budget initiatives are being outlined. When we met based on student data, and again, the data has been consistent, we identified 3 initiatives: emphasizing early literacy achievement, pre-K through 3, closing the identified achievement gaps, proficiency gaps within the Milton Public Schools, pre-K through 12, and advancing science and STEM achievement, STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and math, pre-K through 12. Again, the initiatives were varied, and we centered in and agreed as a leadership team, and I think that the testimony to these initiatives and the impact they're making, again, the movement of student achievement, but when we hear the site councils, parents, teachers, they understand these initiatives, they've been prioritized, they are the agenda items and the topics when we meet as groups within the school district, again, always looking at the student data and what progress we're making in these 3 areas. In the previous presentation, you can find the literature and the research that backs these initiatives, and what the FY14 budget purchased and what FY15 purchased, and now we're making the request for FY16. So in this abbreviated presentation, bringing you back to last year, we began a pilot of a preschool program, identifying that if we could identify students who hadn't been in school at grades ages 4 and 5 before kindergarten, and we bring them into the school, students who haven't had any formal educational experience. We're running a district-wide pilot housed at the Tucker School. This $30,000 will extend and expand the pilot next year to 5 half-day programs, so we'll be able to target exponentially more children. 5 half-day programs in the morning, another 5 half-day programs in the afternoon. In the instructional support area, under early literacy, the additional materials, again, we've set up the room, so the materials would be to expand the program, $5,000, a $20,000 request for implementing townwide Saturday program for 3rd graders identified for early literacy support. In these initiatives, There's been staff requests, text materials and supplies, and extended targeted time. We would not be able to, without the advancement budget, be able to identify funds that provide targeted instruction to students on Saturdays, in the summer, before and after school. This is a pilot that the Title I funds at the Tucker has enabled, the funds have enabled us to pilot, and we believe, my analogy is always, before the divide grows, if the 1 and 2 data that we're analyzing across the district is very similar, and then as you break the code and you go into grade 3, you've learned to read, and now you read to learn. We believe that identifying those rising third graders and third graders right at the beginning, and I want to compliment the Tucker School. Again, they had this initiative up and running by the end of September. And so we're looking to expand that across the district. $50,000 to provide additional professional development opportunities. We had a discussion that Chairperson of the Finance Subcommittee, Member Kelly, has really led the discussion and advocated for identifying professional development funds to provide. It's really one-time funds, which we'll detail at the end, teaches the professional development in these areas. Again, emphasizing early literacy, instructional techniques to target closing the achievement gap, and the professional development to train our teachers in these new science materials. But this $50,000 is in the area of early literacy, and the $30,000 is in the implementation of the Readers Writers Workshop, completing that training for all kindergarten, first, second, and third grade teachers. And lastly, under instructional support, the $20,000 to purchase leveled readers, fiction and nonfiction, to guarantee equal access for all students K through 3. This advancement budget, I did an email today that I CC'd Chairman Walker on, that in the Milton Public Schools, our budget has allowed us over the year to purchase materials, new curriculum, 1 grade at a time, 2 grades, and this advancement budget has really put the curriculum in the hands of our teachers and really making an impact on all of our students at the elementary grades. These leveled readers have been a priority when teachers are writing those mini grants to the MFE. They were an initiative with one of the MFE celebration, and this $20,000 will be able to complete and provide equity K through 3 in all of our classrooms.
Ms. Sheridan?
Thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful. And I just want to say, when this goes on the web, when this gets posted, it might be helpful to say district-wide on all of those, those bullets.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
For the next initiative, closing the achievement gaps, the proficiency gaps, again, in the FY16 advancement budget requests, new positions. You heard the Pierce Site Council presentation. You saw all of the data analysis from the Pierce School, the impact of a reading teacher at grade 6 made on the student achievement, and the number of levels that targeted reading instruction to students that were below grade level at grade 6, the difference one reading specialist could make. And again, it's the analogy for me is at the MFE to see some of these grants that teachers write, and then they're replicated district-wide. The high school has given me a tremendous amount of feedback. I actually identified the students that this high school reading teacher will work with, and the request is for a reading teacher at the high school for students who come in the 9th grade who are not reading at grade level. And the second new position request is for an intermediate reading specialist, a $60,000 request. We put reading specialist in 1, 2, and now a third reading specialist that is district-wide in grade 3, to Member Sheridan's point. This would be a reading teacher at the intermediate level, and Assistant Superintendent Sheehan had some interesting input at one of our meetings about this reading specialist at the intermediate level. Janet?
So we had talked about how there was a significant need, particularly for these groups of children, because they had not had the advantage of our reading specialists in grades 1, 2, and 3. And so while we anticipate that our children, and given that our goal is that all students will read by the end of third grade, we still recognize that developmentally there are some students who are not able to meet those standards, even by the end of third grade. So we think that this might be a position that eventually, we could fade out, given that these children have not had the support in grades 1 and 2, but we also recognize that some children on that developmental continuum of reading do progress at different levels, and that's something that we would also like to take into consideration as we assess the value of this position going forward.
And you know what's very exciting, and I'm going to make this brief, when we go school to school and we sit down with the principals and the coordinators, they use these reading specialists, and every 6 to 8 weeks they reassess who's being serviced by the reading specialist. And so this is these positions have become vital in the Milton Public Schools, and very successful, and we're seeing through this targeted instruction and the reading specialists and the assessment materials that the advancement budget has purchased, unbelievable growth in reading levels. On the instructional support, we've described to the school committee, the finance subcommittee, and the public that we've been involved in this calculus project. The theory of the calculus project is to identify rising 8th graders, to give them pre-teaching in the summer in the math area that they're going to be going into, to give them support during the school year. Dr. Pavlicek can speak to the beginnings of this program in California. The research behind it is phenomenal. We were involved in the National Science Institute grant that with Newton and 2 schools in New York, under the leadership of a group out of New York City, and they weren't funded. They're looking to rewrite the grant and look for other sources of funding. Right now, it would be a $40,000 line item for next year to continue with the cohort we've begun with, and then to identify a new rising group of 8th graders next year. But the model is research proven, and we're looking, again, for the end is to guarantee that all of these students are in honors math track through calculus. The second is a $20,000 request for the Pierce Academy. Again, this has been so successful that the Collycott principal is actually replicating the very model. We're looking at these models. We're analyzing which of these targeted instruction models are benefiting and resulting in the highest amount of student achievement, and this PS model is targeted instruction after school, a $20,000 request. And at the high school bridge program, students who are coming into grade 9 are identified. They are here at Milton High School all summer, and then they are supported all through the school year with tutoring after school, and to assure that their success, students who may not have been meeting with academic success are identified. Again, when we sit down with the high school team, we're tracing these students' grades, their progress reports, their parents' involvement in the school. There's a parent component that parents must be involved in the school and attend as a number of events. And again, we're targeting rising 9th graders and staying with those cohorts. And finally, in the area of science and STEM, the requests, continue with the proficiency gap, excuse me, the $20,000 under instructional support, elementary extended day year, again, targeting students on Saturdays who, through the internal assessments or their MCAS data, it's either before school, after school, or on Saturdays. There's been also a feeling on the school committee, and we have seen in the presentations on the data that the elementary and middle school internal assessments have, we've identified those, we've funded them, the teachers have had professional development, and the middle and high school are identifying this Edwin teaching and learning or this Galileo piece of software, and it really is going to be targeted to the high school and to the upper middle school grades, that they feel that this will move their assessment work internally in English, math, and science at a faster rate, and really to keep up with the work that's being done K-12. $10,000 request, Summer PD Institute on proficiency gap for teachers, and an $8,000 request, a need. And if you go back to the data requests, the data presentations, and the Pierce Site Council presentation, you hear about the need for writing in MCAS and coming forward in PARC, the writing component and the need for a formal writing program within the Milton Public Schools. And Dr. Spalding and the English teachers and writing teachers at the middle school have identified $8,000 in text materials and PD that would be required to really strengthen the writing program 6, 7, and 8 at the Pierce School. Science and STEM, again, through your presentations on data, and from the Pierce School, we've had lengthy discussions about the implementation of, really, I believe now we're at 2 or 3 electives at the Pierce School around STEM and iSTEM, and this, we've had philosophical discussions that this is, every student will still have science in their program of studies, but this $48,000 for a .8 middle school STEM technology teacher would enable the Pierce Middle School students, every student, to have one elective during every year in the area of iSTEM and STEM. And so philosophically, we feel that, again, this would benefit all students, and again, it would support the STEM program. It would be an extension of their science program. In the instructional support, the request is matching that course, and really, the response from the parents and students has been phenomenal about the electives that exist at the Pierce School now. The requirement would be $25,000 for additional iSTEM materials. I've had presentations on curriculum such as Projects Lead the Way. They're really doing a lot of research around local universities and the kind of training that teachers need and the kind of materials that they would need to implement this program. The second, under instructional support, $10,000 to purchase text equipment and additional supplies for the expansion of STEM into grade 4. It seems like yesterday we began our STEM in the English Pathways Initiative in grade 1, grade 2, wildly successful. Grade 3 has been very, very successful, and now next year we're moving into grade 4. And the Advancement Initiative has enabled us to fund that program expansion. And the next budget request is $35,000. This year we purchased, and you have had several science presentations, the science text materials and supplies, the cost kits for grades 3, 4, and 5. This would complete the purchase in K1 and 2, $35,000 for science materials at the elementary school to put in the hands of all of our primary elementary school teachers, and to have all of our students have the upgraded science curriculum and meet all of the new frameworks. The next is a $70,000 high school science materials. This has been in the advancement initiative before, and as we prioritize, we've moved it ahead again. This would update the biotech lab equipment in the high school. That original, Ms. Bagley-Jones always speaks to this, the original funding from that came from the MFE. We have used that funding that we used the last portion of this year to continue upgrading that biotech lab, but this would be really a rehaul of that biotech lab and bring it up to the grade that really is appropriate for 2016, and to begin introduction of digital equipment into all science classes. Our science department head last year and this year meets with us, and our science equipment, we've had it since the school building project, and it becomes out of date, and we really haven't had a purchase of expanding and replacing science equipment. $20,000 for Summer PD Institute on science and STEM, and a $10,000 budget item targeted professional development to support teachers in K-1, 2 with the new science materials. So you're familiar with this grid and the advancement initiative. In total staff, 3.3 FTEs. In the area of technology, $20,000. In the area of instructional texts and materials, $173,000. In the area of extended learning time and professional development, $220,000. And the total, that's $200,000, excuse me, the total, $591,000. And working with the Finance Subcommittee, asked Dr. Pavlicek, $283,000 of those budget requests could possibly be funded through one-time funds. We're very conscious that what is a one-time fund, and we have an informed audience of parents and PTO members, school committee members, and finance subcommittee members, so we worked with our leadership team, and of the $591,000 request for FY16 advancement, a possible $283,000 could be one-time funds.
Discussion? Ms. Bagley Jones, questions? Ms. Padera?
So I just have a couple questions. It looks like, and I could be wrong, but we're adding a math or a reading specialist at the high school and an additional reading specialist, grades 4 through 5. So I'm just wondering, what do we have? Do we have somebody in place? And I see what we're saying and catching up with the people that we kind of missed when we added those additional reading specialists. I understand that part. But do we have people now at the high school that are helping students who struggle with reading comprehension? Or is this someone that we're adding that's going to fill that gap completely? And if so, what are we doing at the middle school? Because that seems to be, you know, we're adding the middle school, we're adding K through 5. What's happening at the middle school?
So at the middle school, through investigations and putting together 5.2s, again, we work with Finance Subcommittee, and the organization has 4,000 children, so we move ahead, and we always look at where we can take existing personnel. And so Dr. Spalding, which I attribute having been an elementary school principal, realized at grade 6 students who were 2 to 3 to 4 reading levels below grade level, but they were not children who were identified with special needs.
Okay.
Their reading skills were below. So within the Milton Public School budget, we put in a grade 6 reading teacher.
Okay.
Again, she reorganized, I explained this at one other meeting, I believe, and so the data on the levels, the increase in reading levels of those students, that a majority of those students did not need reading support in the 7th grade.
Right.
So that one teacher is now staying with some children into grade 7, and she's picked up new 6th graders. And so when we share these practices and procedures and techniques that are working, the high school whole entire leadership team said, we have children who do not have identified special needs. They may have even been tested for special ed,
Okay.
but they are reading grade levels below the 9th grade. And I sat down, I met with the entire high school team. They have feedback from all of the English teachers, and this would be in addition to their English class, targeted reading instruction. My master's is a reading specialist, so that is a very, very skilled area. What is your what are you weak in vocabulary? Are you weak in breaking the code? Is is comprehension your area of weakness? And so you actually have to be specialized in either high school or primary grades.
Right.
So this person would service 9th graders.
So just to be clear, I think you answered my question perfectly. So at the middle school, we had someone in
One.
that place that was doing that service to students that weren't identified on an ed plan or with special
Exactly.
needs. And the high school, we needed that same thing because we had seen success at the middle school. Okay, that's great. And then just 2 other questions, I think. The elementary extended day, there are 2 different items in here. and I'm a little just confused about the difference, because there's one under literacy, I believe. Implement townwide Saturday program for third graders identified for early
Absolutely.
literacy.
I'm glad you brought this up.
And then 20,000 elementary extended day year. But you qualified them both as Saturday programs, but I think they're somewhat different, aren't
So
they?
that's a great point, and before we put this up on the web, the $20,000 for the townwide Saturday program for third graders, that's picking up third graders at the beginning of the third grade year and giving them support with our goal of everyone being at proficient and advanced at the end of grade 3. That's very targeted, not based on MCAS scores, based on teacher recommendation, their internal assessments. And then the other request would be for students at grades 3, 4, and 5 who, based on their MCAS scores, are really beginning in December through January and February, leading up to MCAS and now POC, Saturday sessions. Some of the schools do before school sessions, some do after school sessions. So that's really targeted for students who have already taken the MCAS. Third graders wouldn't be going Saturday and in addition to this, but based on their MCAS scores, fourth and fifth graders, but they have also picked up in past years when we didn't have those funds, third graders.
So are these schools deciding what's most successful in terms of the schedule of extending the
Absolutely.
day? Because I've heard some schools say Saturday just doesn't work for our kids, or so they can decide how they're going to do the program
Yes.
based on when they think they can get the kids there? Okay, and then just one last question. The STEM teacher, we face this a little bit with the health curriculum. We're adding it. How is that going to limit their curriculum choices? Are their elective choices? Because I know the sixth graders have a problem sometimes. They have a limited space. If they're in band and now they have to take health, will that limit their choices if they also have to take an iSTEM course?
Well, I think you spent a tremendous of time with Dr. Spalding, and again, the feedback has been around the health, but they feel through the technology offerings, there are 2 teachers in the area of technology, that she will be able to, right now, we have no feedback that it's limiting the elective choices with the
Okay.
iSTEM and the STEM.
All right,
But
perfect.
I'll bring that up to Dr. Spalding, but I know she's thought this whole process through.
Okay, great.
Ms. Bagley Jones?
A couple of questions, a couple of thoughts, and just to follow up on that, I thought health ed was flipped with gym. Mary, don't they have health one half and gym the other half, or a quarter and a quarter?
The half, so that every student
So it's
is now
not an
having health.
elective.
Right.
So,
But it's in that same space.
Same
Right.
time.
yeah, but it could be worked around, because I think that that's important, that they get the chance to take health. It seems like a really, very tight presentation in terms of what's needed, how you're going to get there, and I like that. I do like the professional development, the materials, supplies, and of course, the biotech room. I think that it's really positive to have that high school support, even though I do understand what Becky was saying, because I think in general in education, we look at early intervention only, but then the kids in high school aren't getting the support that they need. So I think that that's really, I like that you're doing that. My only concern is the way that we did STEM and iSTEM now, it feels like it's inclusive, right? Everybody gets a chance to take it. The other programs, the Bridge, the Saturday School, the Pierce Academy, they're a little, when a kid is going to the Saturday school. The kids know who goes to what. So it's a little self-identifying about who needs extra help, and it's all throughout, it's written about at-risk kids and at risk. And I just am concerned. I've gotten feedback from parents over the years about, my kid isn't going to Saturday school. Why did my kid get this letter about Saturday school? Everybody will know, that they're not going to be there. So is there a way to, and this might just be pie in the sky, but I do think it is somewhat identifying of kids.
I'll tell you, they're very conscious of that, the principals, and what they've included is some kind of, at the 2 of the schools, some kind of physical activity. You have English, you have math on Saturday morning, and then you have a physical activity, so they rotate through. But I have to tell you, at the beginning of the Tucker third grade program, I can't testify, I believe she said every Saturday morning, she said almost 100%
I was thinking about
attendance.
the higher grades.
Oh, the higher grades.
You know, Ridge goes for ninth graders, Pierce Academy. Anyway, there may not be
And
anything
so-
you can do, but the focus has to be on inclusionary
And
practices and
so-
how we do that.
And what this is, to me, it's targeted instruction, and it's, the message should be, we're helping you to experience success in school. And so I've often analogized to Finance Subcommittee. We both, I can't catch up with you in the 49-minute math period, but if you're backfilling my skills during this Saturday or after-school program, the carryover has to be that I'm experiencing success in school. And so I have to say that we are committed. All the research proves about extended year, extended day, and we would have never been able to provide these extended learning opportunities without the advancement budget, and we're seeing the results.
And if I can just add a comment to that, Mary, I think you're absolutely right. And this is where the mentors come in terms of, I can imagine some of these high school English teachers I know sitting a kid down saying, look, yeah, it's bad, but this is how it's going to help you. So speaking to that
Point's well
mentoring
taken.
role, just to throw it out there again, because I do think teachers have to talk to kids about why they should go to the Saturday program or why they should go to the Bridge program,
Right.
et cetera. So, thank you.
I'll bring back that feedback.
Ms. Sheridan?
So I really appreciate the way, I love this chart year after year. I think it's really helpful to be able to see it all in categories, and, but what's really striking for me this year is that when we look at the new, not initiatives, but bringing initiatives forward, such as the data software and the writing program and the new science materials, that they all kind of come with, not kind of, they all come with professional development that's tied into it. So that's really, we're saying more than we're just we're giving you new things, we're saying, we're not just giving it to you, we're expecting you to do this professional development that's going to really bring this equipment and materials and supplies to the full value. We'll get the full value out of it. So I really appreciate that when I look at that, and when I see the fact that there's 283 in one-time funds that can be identified, I totally agree with the way you've broken that out. I don't know if people at home can see where those numbers are, so just, it's pretty much everything under technology, or the one thing under technology, and all of the instructional text and materials are one-time money, and then the PD that goes with it. Just, I think it's helpful for people at home to be able to see how that is. So really, the remaining funds are the staff, which are critical, and I'm kind of encapsulating this here for people at home, but the staff, and also the opportunities for children to extend their learning, which, is, as you've said so eloquently, Ms. Gormley, there just isn't enough time in the day to get all the learning done that needs to be done. So I think that this graph is really helpful and articulates our message quite nicely, so thank you for that.
Mr. McCarthy?
No.
Oh, sorry.
So just one question I have, just kind of like looking at the graph on page 9. So like with my little quick calculations, I got that we're spending $103,000 on like STEM programs, like between STEM, the middle school teacher, the STEM materials for grade 4, iSTEM materials, and the $20,000 Summer Institute Science and STEM professional development. One question I have on that is like, so we're starting STEM, like I know a lot of middle schools take it, a lot of elementary schools. How are we bringing that up to the high school level? Like, I understand, like, we have so many science programs at the high school and so many technology programs, but how are we really bringing STEM so it's going to be a full experience through Milton High? Because STEM wasn't around when I was in Glover in middle school, but how are we going to bring it up so it goes through the high school experience?
It's a great question. And so were you here for the science presentation?
I believe so.
I'll target and perhaps have you set up with central office and Amy Tom, the high school science director, And when we met with Christy Chiapetta, who's from the middle school, and Amy Tom from the high school, and they both have professional development providers that will train the existing science teachers to incorporate the STEM into their existing science classes at the high school. And we're actually on the brink of becoming associated with one of these organizations at the high school, and then put all of our science teachers through this training. So if you're in the biology, or if you're in the chemistry, or if you're in the physics, you will have the STEM experience and the iSTEM experience in your science classes, rather than at the elementary, or I talked about the middle, another science class. So it's very important. Everybody's taking science. But at the middle school, it's the iSTEM is an additional program, but at the high school, the goal is to integrate the iSTEM into every one of, so every science teacher masters those iSTEM techniques and integrates the iSTEM into the existing curriculum. So at your convenience, and you can report out on it the next meeting, I'm going to set you up with Amy Tom. And so you asked a very timely question, because I'm not going to belabor this, but when we were looking at the fourth grade curriculum, I had them actually sit down with the professional development provider that the high school is looking at, and the professional development provider the middle school is looking at, and really find out which curriculum would be best for our fourth grade. So everybody, the goal is to have the iSTEM integrated into every science, so you don't have to somebody's point, Ms. Bagley-Jones's point, I believe, or Becky Padera's point, give up an elective for the STEM. Not as eloquent as Ms. Tom, but you'll report out on it next time.
Mr. Zulus?
I'm hesitant to speak up because I may get an assignment from Mrs. Gormley as well. So broadly speaking, this is the third year, and I think it's fair to say from the presentations and the evidence that we've received that there is evidence that these initiatives are having their intended effect,
Yes.
and that after the first really year and a half that they're working. So my question, have you given thought in terms of making the case as to what would happen if we were to abandon these efforts at this point, you know, and abandon the advances that we've made at this point?
It would really be devastating. Their priorities, would they be at the cost of what we're already doing? What we're already doing is very important, but these initiatives, and again, when we began, we sometimes, you know, some of the principals would mention advancement. Now you have parents that understand these advancement initiatives. You have entire staffs who understand the goal, they understand the initiatives for the district, they're owning the student data. So not funding these initiatives, not prioritizing these initiatives in the district, again, their priorities in the district, they would be at the expense of other initiatives which are the basis of our educational, really, vision and experience of what we're doing. So they really have become part of us. And I think in the site councils, we don't ask them to refer to the advancement initiatives or give you the feedback about what's happening. But it would be devastating to not be able to move at this pace and provide these materials to teachers, to teach students, and the time and the professional development. And I want to, this is a collaborative effort. I think it's important to know that the teachers feed the principals, and we meet with the finance subcommittee, and it's interesting when Ms. Sheridan mentioned professional development, to have Ms. Kelly, if you don't mind. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly. You know, you have school committee members who are informed, they listen, they bring their own knowledge, and Ms. Kelly is an advocate for the professional development to go along with these curriculum initiatives and text materials and supplies. So, Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
But, you know, it just proves that it doesn't come from the principals or the leadership team. Again, this is, I can't say enough that this is vetted for a tremendous amount of time with the finance subcommittee. They might as well join the leadership team, and we do it all collaboratively, and we own what we're recommending to the school committee, and to the warrant committee, and then town meeting. Thank you for the question, though.
Do I have a motion for approval?
Are we voting on this now?
We are.
I thought we were going to look at the whole budget first.
No?
I would, can I make a motion that we look at the whole budget first? Because wouldn't it be more informative to see the whole budget before we vote on two separate things? It all affects each other.
This is the approach we've used for the last 3 years, and the budget look is the first look at the budget. If you feel that would be helpful, I suppose we can defer this vote until after.
That would be helpful, I would think.
I don't think we need a vote. Ms. Kelly?
Well, so are we saying at some point this evening, we will vote?
We're saying at the end of the next presentation, we'll vote on advancement.
Is that your understanding? Fine.
Is that okay?
Fine.
Ms.
Fine.
Bagley Jones? Okay, then,
On to the next presentation.
to the next presentation.
Could we get the lights?
Yes. Because the ready century, we're already 14 years into the 21st century.
In looking at our proposal, our initial proposal for fiscal 16 budget, we're looking at the portions of it that really drive what our request is going to be. And just to sort of itemize it here, even though we haven't yet voted it, we have a recommendation for $591,000 in this advancement proposal. Working backwards from that, we also have $500,000 of our existing budget for this year, which was funded last year by one-time funds, things that we said we did not need to replicate this year. It was funded out of the town's one-time funds. So it was the intention not to replace them this year. So that's an amount that's actually driving our request downwards for fiscal 16. We won't need that $500,000 again. The major feature of it is our negotiated wage agreements, which come in at $1,239,575. And we'll itemize these all in a moment. One other driving feature of this is we're going to request 2 new special educators. And again, we'll talk about those in a moment. These are not in the advancement budget, but these are positions that we actually need within our operational budget. Again, as a contributing factor to decreasing our budget, the 2 maintenance positions we have in our budget as of fiscal 16 will be transferred over to the town's consolidated facilities department. So those are 2 salaries that we are currently carrying. In our last contract negotiation with AFSCME, those 2 positions, effective this past July, were actually transferred to the Consolidated Facilities Department. They are overseen by the Consolidated Facilities Department from the town. They get their work duties from that department. Their overtime is approved from that department. Everything is run through that department, except the contract was negotiated post the budget. So the money for it was still sitting in our department. So we're paying them even though Consolidated Facilities is overseeing them. So effective in fiscal 16, those salaries would leave our budget to the tune of $140,000 and move over to the Consolidated Facilities budget in the town. We have another factor, some estimated out-of-district tuition increases for our special education students and an increase in the bus fee. Those together are approximately $180,000. We have about $95,000 in additional facilities costs, mainly utility costs and some increased maintenance. and all other costs, which, again, I can itemize in a few minutes, an additional $121,000, leading us to ask for an increase in our budget this year of $1,706,610. So that's the story in a nutshell that we're recommending as an initial budget proposal. To get into the details of these 8 items, you've seen the advancement proposal. I mean, $591,000, $125 for early literacy, $248 for closing the proficiency gaps, and $218 for science and STEM, for that total of $591,000 that we just went through. $198,000 is for salaries for 3.3 positions. $90,000 is for salaries for extended day and year offerings, and $303,000 is for non-salary items, text materials, supplies, professional development, etc. So that's just a one-slide recap of the advancement proposal. The negotiated wage agreements, if we roll over our existing staff, include the steps, lanes, and our cost of living, next year our employees have what's called a 1-1 split. They'll get 1% at the beginning of the year and another 1% raise midway through the year. And not including any advancement positions, not including the new SPED positions, and not including the maintenance positions that we're backing out, we would need a total of $1,239,575 to roll over our existing staff, exclusive of the maintenance folks, to next year. That's an effective 3.89% increase in our salary line. And as you can tell from our ask, that is the majority of the cost of our request, our proposed request for next year. Our 2 new special education positions, I'll defer to my left.
The 2 new special education positions, we've had extensive discussions around these positions and the requests from the leadership team. And the first position, a K-8 inclusion specialist. Again, our special ed program is moving towards students remaining in their classroom and having special education providers co-teach with the teachers. We have teachers who know the curriculum, who have been provided the professional development. It's very hard for a special education provider to be able to master English, master math, master the science, the social studies curriculum. And so the philosophy is the classroom teacher masters the curriculum. The special ed provider is in the classroom to adapt, to reinforce with students with IEPs. And so this requires a tremendous amount of training. It's what our co-taught model is at the elementary, really. The perfect again, all day, the 2 teachers teaching, but this inclusion specialist would work with special education teachers and regular ed teachers, how to collaborate, how to co-plan. Again, when I go into a classroom, co-teaching is not one teacher in the back of the room. Co-teaching, my analogy is, they finish one another's sentences. And when you look in the room, you can't tell who's on an IEP. Both teachers are servicing all of the children in the room. And so this takes a tremendous amount of professional development. One might ask, why isn't it isolated professional development? These inclusion specialists are in those classrooms every day. They're modeling, they're observing, and then sitting down with teachers and giving and critiquing their lessons. So this is a very, very important position that would really be integral to our moving our special ed program forward. The second position is a high school special education teacher, and again, we're moving towards inclusion. So at the high school, again, just exponently, the special ed teacher does not have a degree in math, English, social studies, so the movement is to put the special education teachers in the math class, in the science class, in the English class. And so based on the enrollment and the anticipated enrollment next year in special education and really the move towards inclusion at the high school, these are 2 prioritized requests for our regular ed budget in the area of special education.
Ms. Sheridan?
I just would like some clarification around the inclusion specialist. That is a teacher's position, correct?
Yes.
And not an administrative?
Good question.
Okay, thanks.
Both teaching, well, yes, both teaching positions, both in Unit A.
As mentioned a moment ago, the two maintenance positions being transferred to consolidated facilities, salaries plus overtime, plus equipment allowances that they have in their contract, total $140,000 that we had budgeted, that we wouldn't budget again next year. It would move over to the town's consolidated facilities department. Special education costs, the other drivers, out-of-district tuition increase. The out-of-district tuition rates have not been set for next year. This is an assumption of a roughly 6% increase in out-of-district costs. That's a fairly standard rate for medically related costs. We won't know for a while what that actual cost is. If we do know, say in the January to February timeframe, we would be able to adjust this accordingly. But at the moment, we don't know what these costs are set by the state, not always in a terribly timely fashion. So we'll find out when we find out. And the transportation increase is just an increase in special education transportation costs as opposed to regular ed transportation costs. This is our small van contract.
Sorry, Mr. Zulus.
And Glenn, that 6% increase, that's based on historical increases? Is that the estimate? That estimate's based on historical?
This year was a little less, but generally when we forecast health insurance and health-related costs for the last several years, we've been using around 6%. As I say, hopefully in the next couple months, we'll have a better estimate of where it's coming in. Generally, late December, we get some of the first numbers for either some of the residential schools or some of the collaborative placements, but we won't know for a little while yet, so just being conservative at this point. Facilities costs, again, we're projecting increases in heat and utilities. Not surprising. We use a lot of heat and utilities. So $55,000 is not actually a terribly large increase. We have locked in our electricity prices for the next year. Bill Ritchie has done work with our vendors, and he and I signed great locks in about a month ago, just before NSTAR said they were going to increase electricity rates by 30%. We did much better. So that was a savings, even though it's a cost. And maintenance cost increase as our buildings age. We need to replace more things. And so we've been doing a lot of our maintenance from our facilities rental fund. We've had a lot of good rentals. We've been able to bring in a lot of money that way. The Director of Consolidated Facilities is very proud of saying that he's never replaced anything in the auditorium on the town's dime. It's always been through our rentals that we do all of our maintenance costs in the auditorium. And this summer, we had some repairs to do with some of the screening in the field house that we were able to do out of facilities rental and so forth. So we've made good use of that money, but as the buildings age, more things need repair. So there's a minor cost there. I mean, $40,000 is, it's a tenth of 1% of our budget, but it's negligible. It's certainly a number by itself. And all the other costs that feed into our request, actually, policy and administration is going down by about $10,000. We had some one-time costs in there that we're not going to, budget for again. We have some strategic planning costs over the last couple of years and things like that. Instructional leadership, that's down a little bit. That's actually money that's more or less transferred into text materials and professional development. So really those two should be read together, because that's money. Instructional leadership is money that the principals spend on the schools, and text materials are money that the principals spend on the students, and sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. you know, you have a pallet of paper, you could probably argue it either way. So for the principal's budget purposes, those two lines are lumped together, and they're given an amount to work with, and they're allowed to move things back and forth between them. But there's a roughly between the two of them, a roughly $32,000 increase in not only text and materials, but the professional development costs that we own. Other instructional services, $18,000, that's cost of some contracts and so forth. You know, that covers everything from tuning the pianos to rebinding books to a variety of contractual services that we have related to instruction. And finally, technology costs. As we move more and more into the park assessment, we need more and more devices. The MFE has been wonderful at supplying us with things. We got some capital money for supplying some equipment. We've also supplied some equipment out of our own budget. But as we're getting to the point where, you know, MCAS is being replaced by Park, and all students are going to be sitting down at the same time with a device in front of them, that's a lot of equipment, a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of technology needs. And we need to bump up our technology budget a little bit next year to deal with that. So that was another cost. And when you put that all together, you get our request, our budget by category, just to give a graphical picture of it. Regular education instruction is 49% of our budget. Special education instruction is 26% of our budget. So that tells you 75% of our budget is immediately spent on just the instruction. Instructional services, which is our support, is another 7%. Instructional leadership, which is our principals and building-wide supplies, is another 7%. So now you're up to 89%. And that leaves you just really facilities is 7%, policy and administration, the overall district administration is only 3%, and technology at 1%.